Have you ever been betrayed by someone you thought you could trust completely? My fiancé wanted one last fling before we married. I was stunned, but I knew I needed to act. Walking away was only the beginning. What came next changed everything. But before we begin, make sure to subscribe. I have a goal to reach 1,000 subscribers, and it can only be possible with your help. Let's get started. I, 32, have been engaged to Shannon, 29, for 3 years. We had a lot in common from the start, so it was simple for an awkward guy like me to ask her out. We met 8 years ago while we were both in college. I studied material science, whereas she studied computer science. There wasn't much overlap between our fields, but we were both science buffs who spent much time debating advancements like CPUs, battery technology, and so on. During one of these chats, I realized I loved her, and the rest is history. After college, I landed a nice position in a research lab where I still work now. Shannon took a little longer to find work, but he eventually became a junior developer for a business. That startup is no longer in business, but she has changed jobs several times, something she says is familiar in the software industry. She is currently a senior developer for an e-commerce platform. It's not quite what she expected, but she can't complain about the salary. Our lives together were pleasant. We both worked hard to reach where we were and made strides in our fields. 3 years ago, I was confident about our plans to propose to her. She enthusiastically answered, yes, that night, and we discussed possibly starting a family someday. We started accumulating money to buy a house and even looked into suitable school districts for when we had children. She appeared as dedicated to making this work as I was. I truly believed we were making a good life together, but everything was going to come apart because of something dumb. She informed me she had something important to say when we were lying in bed after a long day at work. I finished my research, and she mentioned that she had been feeling restless recently. When I asked her what she meant, she said she had never had the opportunity to explore when she was younger and thought she had missed out on the no-strings-attached lifestyle. I remained mute for a while. This was an unusual topic for us to discuss. We'd only dated 2 people before meeting, so we were quite inexperienced. I hesitantly told her I had also wondered about it, but in a detached manner. We were both pleased with the lives we were leading. I told her that many independent individuals would envy what we shared. She was not convinced, which made my stomach clench. Right then, I could see she was having second thoughts about our relationship, but I wasn't sure what they were. I was incredulous. I questioned if she, a prosperous lady in a relationship that most women her age would give anything to be in, regretted not going through a hoe phase when she was younger. She told me this with a straight face. Worse, she said she wanted one final fling before we married. She attempted to sugarcoat it, claiming that it would be better for our relationship in the long term since it would make her feel more confident about our future. That was nonsense, yet she insisted on it as if it made sense. How was cheating on me while we were engaged meant to increase trust in our relationship? The entire event hurt. One of the main reasons I was drawn to Shannon in the first place was because she didn't seem like the kind to disrespect her relationship. I had always been faithful and committed to her in return. I had done everything I could to be my most excellent partner, but suddenly she acted as if I wasn't enough. The more I thought about it, the angrier I grew. She couldn't feel secure in our relationship because she hadn't dated half a dozen different guys when she was younger. She needed to sleep with some random guy to justify the 8 years of love and commitment I had given her. I told her outright that I didn't believe this was healthy and couldn't agree. To my surprise, she expressed disappointment and did not pursue the matter further. She dismissed it as a stray thought, and the discussion ended there. Looking back, that should have raised my suspicions. I should not have let the matter go so quickly, but I desperately wanted to put the unpleasant topic behind us. I truly believed it would be out of our lives after that, and it was, until 2 weeks later. I discovered my fiancé's phone on the kitchen counter while cooking. A notification from her buddy Vanessa appeared, and the message's substance made me suspect. When I realized Vanessa was still in a proud hoe phase, I knew I needed to investigate further. While Shannon was preoccupied with the stove, I stole her phone from the counter, made some dumb excuse, and went. I locked myself in the bathroom before unlocking the phone and checking her texts with Vanessa. As I scrolled through their conversation, I felt my stomach sink. The texts were far worse than I could have expected. They were discussing Shannon's last fling. It turned out she had done more than just talk about it. She had done it. The texts with Vanessa were vivid, with no shortage of detail and no sense of shame. Shannon was bragging about hooking up with Lance, one of the younger developers from her work. I recognized his name. He worked beneath her on her team. They'd been hooking up after work for some no-strings fun. I felt sick with anger. Shannon was portraying her affair as if it was some sort of personal accomplishment, stating she felt strong and liberated to have sex without commitments. Meanwhile, Vanessa egged her on, calling her fearless for living her best life. It was as if I had forgotten who Shannon was. The woman I had fallen in love with would never do something like this. Out of curiosity, I read back over their conversations before our conversation, and I confirmed what I suspected. Vanessa was the one who planted the dumb idea in Shannon's brain in the first place. That, however, did not justify Shannon in the least. She was a grown lady who should know well enough to distinguish between good advice and ridiculous thoughts that should be rejected. I raced down to the kitchen, outraged. When she noticed me, she laid down her utensils and asked if I was okay. I returned her phone to the counter and added, "I saw your messages with Vanessa." She looked at me briefly, then returned to what she was doing before I entered. She tried to downplay it, claiming it was merely a fling and that she had told me about it. There was no apology or regret in her gaze. She only shrugged as I looked at her in bewilderment. I battled to maintain my composure and reminded her that she hadn't told me she was going to sleep with someone. We discussed it, and both agreed it was a horrible idea. She shrugged again and stated, "I changed my mind. It was just something I had to do to know for certain." I felt horrified with her. I told her she couldn't change her mind about something like that because it affected both of us. She hadn't been having a fling as she kept claiming. She had cheated on me, plain and simple. Every time I mentioned adultery, her face darkened as if she was furious that I dared to suggest that she had cheated. I didn't mind because it was what she had done. She cheated on me, and now she was nonchalantly putting away utensils as if she hadn't just ended our relationship. I asked her what she wanted to know, for sure. She replied in the same casual tone that she'd been looking for clarity on whether we were truly destined to be together. I wanted to rip my hair out because it was so ridiculous. I tried to grab her shirt and shake some sanity into her. Instead, I asked her if our 8 years together needed to be more to prove our relationship was working. She simply glanced at me as if I was overreacting. Again, she stated that it was healthy to experiment before committing and that people do it all the time. I realized I couldn't get through to her. She was standing there, pretending her recent romance was a little setback, while I was acting like the life I intended to build with her was collapsing. The worst part was that she didn't apologize in the least. I'd have felt better if she'd begged and cried, but she was concerned with preserving her right to do whatever she wanted without consequences. Her casual attitude toward all of this hit deep. I could no longer see the woman I loved. The individual before me accepted this betrayal as if it were a minor incident. I informed her that I needed time to think and would spend the next several days at a friend's house. That's when she realized how severely I was taking it, since she stopped sorting utensils and approached me. First, she advised me to take it easy and reminded me of our previous conversation. That was my breaking point. I said that she knew darn well that I had not given her permission to be drilled by another guy. She remained silent after that. I'm typically a quiet guy, and I believe she's only seen me shout once or twice, so my outburst terrified her. I couldn't make myself sorry for her. She didn't deserve it. I left her in the kitchen in astonishment and stormed around the house, gathering my belongings. She did not bother following me or saying anything. She could sense she'd made a colossal mistake, and I believe she was afraid of causing me to react again. When I had finished loading my belongings into my car and was about to drive away, she approached my window to try again. She finally tried to apologize, but it was too late. I promised her I'd get in touch when I was ready. I'm at a friend's house, still shaken by what happened. I'm not sure what was worse, the fact that she cheated on me or how she pretended it was nothing. I know I'm done with her. The sooner I get rid of her, the sooner I'll be able to rebuild my life. But losing away 8 years like that is such a sad thought. I'm still determining where I'll start following this. Shannon harassed me with SMS messages. At first, it was all apologies, with her saying that we had discussed it and that it was a misunderstanding. She sent messages such as, "We can fix things if we both try, and we can't end things over this." I kept ignoring her, and finally the tone of her texts began to shift. She went from apologizing to justifying her actions, claiming that exploring was part of figuring out what she wanted in the long run. She even proposed that I consider having a fling myself to see how liberating it felt. She appeared to believe that if I tried, I'd understand why she did it and miraculously join her side. Perhaps she believed allowing me to sleep with someone else would be sufficient punishment. I did not respond to any of her messages. I was already over her and didn't want to put myself through the agony of listening to her. Instead, I called the wife of the man she cheated with. Yeah, he was married and had a child. Another layer of sadness in this pitiful situation. I knew the guy very dimly and his wife even less. I knew her name was Amy, which was enough to lead me to her on social media. I sent her a note outlining what my fiancée and her husband had been up to. Understandably, she didn't trust anything I said at first. I hadn't recorded Shannon's phone messages because I didn't expect to need them. Fortunately for me, Shannon had sent enough incriminating proof to my phone in the form of apology messages. The communications were essentially a confession of guilt from her, but one line in particular. It wasn't serious. Nothing between Lance and me was enough to persuade Amy that her husband was combining business and pleasure. Naturally, she was heartbroken to learn what her husband was up to at work. Amy and I exchanged a few messages after that, and she informed me she was going to face Lance that night. She requested that I stay in touch since it would make her feel less alone in dealing with this, and I agreed. I couldn't help but feel horrible for her. She was in an identical scenario to me, and I was the one who delivered the bad news to her. I knew it wasn't my responsibility that she was in this predicament, but I felt obligated to offer moral support. Later that night, she informed me about the aftermath of their encounter. She had attempted to kick Lance out of the house, but he refused, so she was residing with an aunt of hers. She had taken her child, leaving Lance at home alone. That gave me a sense of satisfaction. I was relieved to learn that he and Shannon were left alone with remorse. I had an update for her as well. I informed her that Shannon had texted me, asking why I had told Amy about their affair. She accused me of destroying their marriage and blowing things out of proportion. She told me I didn't need to involve individuals outside our relationship in our troubles. I reacted, informing her that she had brought an outsider into our relationship and her body first. Of course, I omitted that line from my retelling to Amy. Unlike Shannon, Amy thought I had done nothing wrong by telling her. She stated that she should have found out now rather than later. She said that she and Lance were still discussing it, trying to straighten things out, but she was so upset that she wanted to get back at him. I was also angry at Shannon, but I must admit that I had not considered retaliating against her. I asked what she had in mind. Amy pointed out that her employer had stringent laws against employee fraternization, and their short affair clearly breached them. They'd both likely face a suspension, especially if we complained about it. We talked about it, and we both agreed that we were pissed off enough to take things to the next level. That night we got on the phone and collaborated on an email she would send to their firm. We decided it would have a more significant impact because she was the lower-ranking employee's spouse. Based on this, we believed the corporation would feel more driven to take action. It was past midnight when we received an email that we thought was appropriate. It contained all the receipts, messages she had obtained from Lance's phone. They were ugly. She had told me their gist and offered to spare me the more explicit texts, but I insisted on viewing them all. Call it morbid curiosity, but I wanted to know the full extent of their betrayal. It was not pretty. She emailed them the following day, and they responded within a few hours. My guess is that they used some software to scan their emails for specific terms. This communication would likely have contained trigger words. In their answer, they stated that they took these kinds of complaints seriously and vowed to take immediate action, as is customary in corporate settings. Surprisingly, they responded quickly. They took a little while to start an inquiry and find texts transmitted through company channels. As expected, there was obvious evidence of inappropriate conduct. Shannon was worse off since she was his superior. Lance was fortunate only to face a suspension. On the other hand, Shannon had committed an unforgivable offense in the eyes of the firm. Therefore, she was let go. Shannon resumed attempting to contact me following her dismissal. I responded to her this time. She blamed me for wrecking her career, claiming that I lost everything over a worthless romance. I informed her that she had done it herself. She slept with a co-worker, jeopardizing both her relationship and her career. I informed her that she had laid the groundwork for her demise, and the rest was up to karma. It turned out that karma was not finished with her. Despite the current employment market, skilled senior developers can still find work because they are in high demand. On the other hand, Shannon was having trouble getting even one bite. This wasn't my guess. She told me so herself. She tried to make me feel sorry for her, but I didn't care. That is not entirely correct. I enjoyed learning that information. I told her I was angry at her for sabotaging our relationship, but I was primarily sad that she had followed ridiculous advice from her airhead friend. I couldn't believe Shannon had believed that line about needing to explore before committing. Shannon's voice shook as she told me she had nothing left. She claimed her fling had shown her that I was the one she wanted to spend the rest of her life with, but that was no longer the case. She also complained that her career, which she had worked so hard for, had ended. I told her that she didn't deserve me if she had to be run through by another guy to realize I was the one. I also expressed satisfaction that she was no longer considered toxic in her field. I told her she was still young and could change her focus. If everything else failed, there was only fans. Before permanently blocking her phone number, I gave her some parting counsel. I informed her that Vanessa, her bitter, forever single buddy, lived on destroying other women's relationships, and she had triumphed. Shannon's best interests dictated that she be permanently removed from her life. Lance returned to work a few weeks ago but is considering quitting since he can't tolerate the murmurs and glances. Amy told me where she and Lance are in their relationship, getting divorced. A former co-worker admitted that she had a physical relationship with him while working together. Amy had enough and decided to call it quits. Amy and I are still good friends, and because I know this type of inquiry comes up frequently, we are not dating and have no plans to be. We're not the right match for one another, and we need a break from dating. I'm not sure I'll ever be able to trust someone completely again. Still, it's beneficial to have each other's backs. We're both supporting one another on our journeys to pick up the pieces of our lives. That's all for today's video. If you appreciated or found the story intriguing, please give it a thumbs up and leave your thoughts in the comments section below. I'd love to get your thoughts on the twists and turns of this situation. Also, if you're new here, subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't get all updates. I will continue to provide tales, insights, and stuff you want to take advantage of. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in a future video. Take care.